when we all watch television now and have a smart TV, in many ways, the TV is watching you. And you're not watching the TV because it's trying to determine what advertisements to give you.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Super Law YouTube channel. Today we are joined by Neel Chatterjee, sir. Sir is an internationally recognized technology litigator and co-head of the intellectual property litigation practice at King & Spalding. Neel handles high-profile technology litigation for some of the world's largest companies, as well as some of the most promising startup ventures. He has over 3 decades of experience in patent, trade secrets, copyright, internet law, and complex technology disputes, known for taking on high-stake, hard-to-win cases that often break new grounds in untested areas of law. He also is deeply committed to mentorship, diversity, and public interest initiatives. Renowned for his strategic insights, impactful advocacy, he continues to shape the evolving landscape of technology and IP law. Thank you for being with us today, sir. My name is Anshi and I work as an associate with the Super Lawyer team. At Super Lawyer, we showcase inspiring journeys of legal professionals that offer valuable insights that greatly motivate and benefit our readers, which is the legal community and the young lawyers in general. Thank you for being with us. I'd request Divya ma'am to now please continue with the conversation.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Anshi, and thank you, Neel sir, for being here. It's an immense pleasure to host you. I'm the team lead at Super Lawyer. I'm Divya Divedi, and I'm looking forward to having this enlightening conversation as you have more than 3 decades of experience in a field which most of us are looking forward to in India and all over the world. This is something which is changing the world with the disruptive tech and a lot of innovation that is going on. I really do hope that you will enjoy the conversation with us, and most welcome and thank you once again for being here.
Thank you for the very kind introduction.
So we'll start with the very basic question, but I would like to ask about not only your journey in the global technology leadership platform, but also what kind of unique legal or strategic challenges have you seen or encountered while you have been handling these litigations for such big MNCs and companies all over the world, whose innovation is not only transforming the markets, but also they are impacting the society at large. So please do let us know about your journey.
One of the things when you're dealing with new technologies or uncertain areas of law is sometimes the judges are a lot older than the people who might be using the technologies for the first time. I'll give an example. When we all watch television now and have a smart TV, in many ways, the TV is watching you. And you're not watching the TV because it's trying to determine what advertisements to give you. And when you go to a judge, a senior lawyer or a judge who's very, very experienced, they encounter these issues with a certain feeling of creepiness. They may not like it. They may not feel comfortable with it because it isn't what they're used to. It feels strange to have someone else watching you and learning from you or things like that. And when you're dealing with these complex technologies, especially when areas of law are undefined, you have to figure out how to make the technology more accessible and more commonplace, and to build a narrative around the business that will make it be more palatable for companies. A good example would be in the late 1990s, eBay formed. And eBay, as you know, is a website where people can buy and sell things. But no one knew what the internet rules were back then. And many people were selling all kinds of things. They were selling pictures of celebrities. They were selling pirated items. They were selling, I saw someone that said they had a cornflake that looked like it had the picture of Mother Teresa on it. All of these crazy things. And people were even trying to sell their votes in elections. There were graduate students who were trying to sell nuclear guidance systems. And you don't want all the good uses of the technology to be shut down at the expense of the irresponsible uses. And so developing a narrative that made that business model defensible, doing the best you can, working with all the stakeholders who might have an interest, putting guidelines on your website was very important to deal with kind of the creepiness of the bad facts that could come up. because those are kind of one-off things compared to the millions of positive applications.
So the points that you have raised, they actually scare if you do not understand that particular technology. But that hasn't stopped you from being a patent attorney, patent litigator, and being in the IP field. The kind of journey that you have had from the very first clerkship that you did, and then leading one of the most prominent IP litigation practices, your career has been in a different technology driven platform. What kind of shifts have you seen over these many years in the understanding for courts, for companies, and even for the lawyers, for whom it was a very different thing to understand that technology and law can also come hand in hand? So, how have you seen those and how have you dealt with that and made your practice and made yourself at the top of one of the biggest IP companies?
The key is don't be afraid of change. Change creates opportunity. When I first started practicing law, the internet had just started, and no one knew what the rules were around the internet, and no one knew what you could or could not do, how copyright content online. This is before Napster or anything like that. And getting excited about the facts that the rules are not written, and we get to be the social engineers that can help courts write those rules. And then several years later, we have the smartphone revolution, right? Where all of a sudden we're carrying computers in our hands, and we have social media develop. And then we start seeing cars, where cars are now being computers on wheels. And you have crypto developing. And you have mobility, like Wi-Fi didn't really exist when I started practicing law. Or in today's world, generative AI and AI technologies. And embracing those issues, being willing to experiment with them, not only in how you can practice law better, but also talking about all the positive aspects for society. And one of the great things when you're doing high stakes litigation is I get the best experts in the world as my teachers. If I don't understand something, the judge isn't going to understand it. And I'm always able to find great teachers. If I don't think they're great teachers, then I don't have to hire them as experts on cases.
So while you were talking about being social engineers, social engineering has been seen in different perspectives in different cultures and demographies. How have you seen that in relation to IP, especially when it is actually changing the world every day? There is something new coming up every now and then. So how do you see that social engineering work for litigators, for new entrants, for clients, for big MNCs, and especially the ones who are actually going through that particular social engineering, because societies have changed, their understanding for any concept has changed. Like you said, smartphone came and we forgot about the clocks that we used to see, or we had computers in our hands. So how have you gone through that particular process and seen this society change with social engineering? I'm asking you about the psychological perspective more rather than only the technology perspective. If you could enlighten us with that, please.
There's a lot of answers to that question. If we start with the issue of patent law. So when I first started practicing patent law, there was this famous case in the United States called State Street Bank, which basically said business methods are patentable. And that created a massive amount of patents where people would do routine or ordinary things, but then just write the word internet or put a computer that does this thing, and they'd get patents over it. And then they would ask for these exorbitant sums that were way beyond the value of whatever it is the person claimed they invented. And what happened was, over time, the courts started saying, just because you're taking a routine thing that you can do manually, and now you're doing it on a computer, isn't really inventive. And they started paring back those patents and saying those aren't really allowed. And they said, we need some better guidelines on how to apportion what the right damage amount is if someone's infringing. And maybe not in every instance should there be an injunction. And really it was driven heavily by the proliferation of patents that in some cases were not great patents. Now, when you're doing this social engineering, it's not a linear path. Not everything is right. Not everything gets better. Sometimes you take detours and you go in different directions, and the law gets confusing and it gets hard and you get inconsistent principles, but somehow it finds its way through, right? Another example would be internet law. When the internet law started, there wasn't an internet. And how could we engage in commerce online? How could companies like eBay or Facebook or LinkedIn, or at the time it was MySpace, or Orkut was a popular one in India. How do all of those work? Or gig economies, when you have Uber drivers or DoorDash or whatever the services are. All of these things are things that are going to happen in society. Technology is finding a way. And now what we have to do is help work up a pathway of fair legal rules to allow those businesses to flourish while protecting the rights of people along the way.
Wow. It's actually overwhelming to understand all these things and listen to it the way society has changed and it has worked. So you are known as legal counsel for disruptive businesses. There must have been crises also, companies facing those crises, startups facing those crises. How do you balance or help with the crisis management and make sure that their long-term reputation and their strategic considerations are also there in place? Please do let us know about that as well, sir.
Well, it's changed a lot over 30 years, because 30 years ago, in 95% of the cases, the answer was, we don't comment on pending litigation. The courts are going to figure it out. We disagree with their allegations, and that's it. No public commentary. Everything that's being said is being said in court filings. In today's world, with social media the way it is, with news the way it is, with Reddit or places like that the way they are on information proliferation, there is a far bigger need to make certain kinds of public statements. And when you're dealing with crisis communications, you have to make assessments fairly quickly as to what predominates. Is the public commentary really the driver for the business, or is the litigation strategy the driver for the business? And is there a place in the middle ground where you can advance both of them? The things I'm always vigilant on is I very frequently will get a crisis communications consultant involved. I'll want a point person for the client. If it's a small company, it might just be the founder. If it's a bigger organization, they might have their own communications team, and then the legal team. And we generally will come up with a fairly aggressive strategy over what's the 3-hour response, the 6-hour response, the 12-hour response, and so on and so forth. And what are the benchmarks we have to give quick but accurate answers that are very succinct and that are digestible for people. And it is okay at times to say, we don't know yet, we are concerned about this, but we are investigating, and we will give it a report as we learn more. And I'm actually going to be teaching a class on this issue in just about 3 weeks. But really having the team assembled and knowing who they are ahead of time can really help, because having people have a relationship with each other and already know each other's communication styles matters. Because some of the stakeholders will sometimes want to take more aggressive positions than maybe are the right strategy in the larger scheme of things.
So you have founded the Bay Area Diversity Career Fair. What prompted you to do that? Because it has become a cornerstone for diverse law students. And the kind of platform that you have built, how do you assess its role in actually shaping the future of not only diversity, but also inclusion in the legal profession, which is rare to see?
Yeah, so inclusion and diversity is improving in the legal profession. And I can't speak for my law firm, so I'm only going to speak for myself on all of this, obviously. But I founded the Bay Area Diversity Career Fair 25 years ago, largely because I got my first job through a diversity career fair that was in Atlanta, Georgia, roughly, 35 years ago, probably. And I'm not sure I would have been able to get the jobs that I did without that first opportunity. The two judges I worked for were both women judges, and they entered the practice of law at a time when only about 5% of the lawyers in the country were women. And I was always mindful of how challenging it was for them to become so successful and how important their sponsorship of me was to advance it. So when I founded the Bay Area Diversity Career Fair, the goal was really to create a premier event for law firms to hire second-year law students, to have them have an excellent experience where they felt like they could see candidates that were diverse and also would exceed their wildest expectations in terms of quality. And it became wildly, wildly successful. Another important part of it was at the very beginning when we did it, we would do an opening reception in a law firm's offices. And that really mattered because for a lot of diverse lawyers, particularly first generation lawyers whose parents maybe didn't even go to college, they had never set foot inside of a law firm. And they had never really met law firm partners in a social environment. And I figured out that it was really important for them not to be afraid, to find these places accessible and welcoming to them. Now, in today's world, post-pandemic, post-Zoom, these activities happen a lot more online. And I kind of greet it with a little bit of happiness and a lot of sadness because I think these important soft issues of introducing people to law firms and law firm environments is still a really important thing for these kids that haven't been exposed to it before.
The environment and physical environment both have changed drastically after COVID, and for better or worse, no one knows. But the way you have helped with all these inputs to the world, especially this kind of career fair, I really do hope that that kind of thing also happens in India. Because same kind of scare is here as well. It's not easy to reach out to seniors, reach out to senior partners or the law firms in the very start of your career. So it becomes a little difficult for learners over here as well.
One of the things about fair is when we started it, and for I want to say almost 20 years, we would have a career panel for really successful senior lawyers and judges at 8 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday. That's a tough time to get an audience, and it's a tough time to ask people to go. And I have to say, every single diverse person I ever asked to be on that panel always said yes. And that was very, very meaningful. You ask some senior federal judge who's very, very accomplished, can you please wake up and be here at 8 a.m. to talk to these law students? That's their day off. They don't have to do that. And they would always say yes, and they would be inspired by it.
It is inspiring, sir, even to listen about it, that something like this has been happening. It's absolutely inspiring, and somehow that is going to inspire the learners also. I really do hope that it is inspiring enough. So I would now again go back and ask you about the kind of IP disputes that now come across. They have changed over time, related to patents, related to trade secrets, online liabilities, especially in this kind of internet era with the generative AI being there. What kind of areas do you see, or in your view, pose the biggest or greatest challenge for not only practitioners and courts, but also for the companies who face these challenges?
So it's kind of an IP answer and kind of not an IP answer. I think the greatest challenge right now is around data. When I went to law school, you could not take a class on patent law in every law school in the country. You couldn't take it in my law school. But within 2 or 3 years of me graduating, I want to say probably 20% of my graduating class is doing intellectual property work of various kinds. And most of us didn't envision being patent lawyers or patent litigators or trade secrets litigators. Today, it is very hard to take a class on the legal topology of data. Data is not something that can be protected by patents. It can't be protected by copyrights. It can kind of be protected by trade secrets sometimes, but there's a whole regulatory component that falls under it. There's a consumer rights component, and then there's a business monetization component, that all of those pieces have a legal interest in these data and how that data is used and how it's commercialized and how it could be misused or stolen or hacked. And very few people, if you go to law school, you take a class on property or on criminal law or on contracts. You cannot take a class today in almost any law school I know of, other than one I teach, that deals with the legal framework for data. And data is the single largest asset in the world today. And it's kind of amazing to think that even though it's the single largest asset, we have not developed a socially engineered legal framework for it.
So, sir, it has been said by the biggest known people that data is the new oil. The way you were saying that no one is right now working on the legal framework related to data, or they are not teaching it. Don't you see a bigger impact if this does not pick up sooner? It'll become a very big liability, even for not only lawyers or the companies, but also the people whose data is being used or misused. How do you see that kind of problem, maybe with the help of law, being resolved or being solved? Because over the years, as humans have a tendency of coping with things, how do you see that data can be saved or secured for the society at large?
Well, I think other than maybe certain kinds of corporate practices, the data practices in law firms, that could be a market for us to figure this answer out. The data practices in law firms, sometimes they call it cyber, they call it many different things, are the fastest growing practices in law firms today, globally. And everyone defines it differently, everyone kind of manages it differently. And it's also one of these things that there are now not only legal jobs around data, but there's kind of legal adjacent jobs around it, like information security officers or revenue officers who are around monetization of data and things like that.
The why I ask this is because people started doing AI audits and every kind of thing, but no one has heard about data audit. And the way you have said, that is going to be the next big thing. Like patent became one of the biggest things.
Right, but automobile industry is a certain size, right? The oil and gas industry is infinitely larger. So all these generative AI companies and AI companies are doing great things, but they cannot do it without the gas and the oil.
Absolutely true, sir. So when it comes to patents, how do you see the legal or business community adapting to the kind of challenging innovations that are happening? And in the ways, there are no set international standards also. It's taken from WIPO and other standards, but it is evolving every day. And the kind of advanced technologies that we are seeing today, nobody had heard or imagined about. So how do you see, or rather, if you see any weightage in this particular thing, that there should be an international standard set for everything? Although patents is kind of similar in most of the countries, but they are practiced in a different manner. So what do you propose, or what do you see that can be taken care if international law becomes more equal for all the jurisdictions?
Well, you see some harmonization going on in Europe through the UPC, this Unified Patent Court, that is getting some traction. But I'm not sure you're ever going to see a uniform treatment globally unless we have interplanetary patent disputes or something. I just read that they've seen evidence that there was life on Mars. Maybe they had patent laws. I don't know. But I think because patents are a creature of different countries' national interests, in the US, it's in the United States Constitution that people can get patents. It's considered so fundamental to national identity. You'll only be able to go so far as patent harmonization. In the United States, we have jury trials, and in India, you do not. The patent cases are often resolved through interim injunctions in India. In the United States, it's very difficult to get those, but we have a faster time to trial. And so, like, these differences on how the systems work make it much more challenging to kind of have a harmonized approach.
But we can only wish for, if it is uniform, it will be more helpful for every new entrant for that. So the kind of responsibilities that you have with your high profile litigation, how do you manage your personal and professional life? And I usually tend to ask about how do you work towards your mental health more? Because family and everyone's life depends on that particular health. How do you do it over the years? How have you been doing it? How do you propose to do it? And what kind of role does maximum awesomeness practice group play? And the kind of advice that you offer young lawyers through that for having that healthy balance in their careers the way you have done it?
So when you want to do high stakes litigation, and if you want to have a busy private practice, you have to understand that compromises are made, and you have to have family and spouses and maybe parents who are all signed up for this common mission. And, I have a very good relationship with my children. And it's because every time I had free time, I was going to go and do something with them, even if it was at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. But there are also going to be plenty of things that I missed. There were times I was at the school baseball game when there were no other parents there. And the mental health piece, I kind of equate it to being a doctor in an emergency room. Doctors in the emergency room, if you went into the emergency room and all of a sudden they were terrified and they said, "Wow, I've never seen that before. That makes me really nervous." You probably wouldn't like going into that emergency room very much. But not every doctor wants to be an emergency room doctor. And I am kind of an emergency room doctor for law. Really, I thrive off the pressure. I don't get stressed out about it. And I actually am more stressed when I'm not busy than when I am. I think it's very important, at least for me personally, to have a sense of purpose on what I'm doing. Like, I really believe that I'm changing the world one lawsuit at a time. And in addition to the high profile litigation I do, I maintain an active pro bono practice where I'm doing some very, very important cases for free. And if I didn't do all this stuff that people pay me money for, I couldn't also do those things. I couldn't found the Diversity Career Fair. I couldn't do all these other things that have important social good to them. And it makes me very proud that my family and we all kind of rally around it. There's a very large legal nonprofit here in Silicon Valley that I go to. I was on the board for 23 years. And I go to the event and I bring my daughter, who's 21, and everyone sees her and they're like, "Oh, we've seen you grow up coming to these things." And she just blends right in with everybody else. But, kind of completely separating church and state or family and work, for me personally, that has not worked very well. It's better when it's all together and we're all rooting for each other along the way.
Wow, sir, thank you so much for giving us such enlightening conversation and the kind of views or examples you have given. It has been an immense pleasure, and thanks for giving this much time at late evening for you. We are so thankful, and thanks a lot for being here, sir. I really do hope that our learners will understand and learn from the kind of experiences and challenges that you have shared with us. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.